Carl Jung's revolutionary insight wasn't just about empathy. It was about the profound metamorphosis highly sensitive individuals undergo, the journey from wounded to warrior. This transformation either shatters them completely or unearths an unimaginable psychological power. Jung coined this phenomenon sensitivity transformation syndrome. He observed that deeply empathetic people often found themselves trapped in victimhood and suffering. Yet, through what he termed shadow integration, they could emerge psychologically whole and genuinely powerful. This process was transformative because sensitive individuals possess a unique, wounded healer potential. They have the innate ability to transmute their deepest psychological scars into profound wisdom and strength through conscious shadow work and self-discovery. When they finally choose integration over identifying with their pain, their improvement isn't gradual. It's an alchemical transformation. What made this discovery so monumental for Jung was realizing this wounded-to-warrior journey wasn't just personal healing. It mirrored the fundamental human quest for individuation, converting unconscious suffering into conscious strength by integrating their shadow and developing their authentic self. Today, we'll delve into Jung's insights on the empath's unstoppable rise beyond the shadow and why he believed this wounded-to-warrior transformation represents the pinnacle of human psychological development, the healer who refused to heal. Jung's breakthrough began with a patient who epitomized the wounded healer paradox. This individual possessed an extraordinary gift for helping others heal but remained utterly ensnared in their own psychological torment. They offered profound insights to others yet seemed mysteriously incapable of applying that same wisdom to themselves. Jung witnessed something that defied his understanding. The patient actively resisted their own healing, despite having the tools and knowledge to transform their pain. They clung to their wounded identity as if it were their most cherished possession. Jung observed they had turned their wound into an identity rather than a teacher. They feared healing meant losing their empathic abilities, their connection to others' pain, and ultimately, their sense of purpose and specialness. Through meticulous analysis, Jung discovered this patient-exemplified wound identification, the unconscious belief that their value hinged on remaining damaged. They had conflated being hurt with being helpful, suffering with sensitivity, and victimhood with virtue. What disturbed Jung most was recognizing this pattern everywhere. Sensitive individuals often become so entwined with their wounds that they unconsciously sabotage healing, fearing psychological health would diminish their empathic gifts or make them ordinary. This case shattered Jung's assumptions, revealing that true transformation demands not just therapeutic techniques, but a complete identity overhaul, from victim to victor, from wounded to whole. The wounded identity psychology. Jung uncovered why sensitive individuals resist healing despite consciously desiring wellness. They develop wound attachment syndrome, where their pain becomes psychologically indispensable to their sense of self. Jung identified 3 core components that maintain this wounded identity: shadow rejection and false light. Jung observed that wounded empaths often construct angel identities by projecting their capacity for anger, selfishness, and power onto others, while seeing themselves as purely loving. This psychological splitting prevents integration and authentic strength. They fear accessing their shadow, associating strength with those who hurt them, creating an unconscious equation between personal power and becoming abusive. Suffering as currency. Jung documented how wounded individuals often receive pain payments, sympathy, attention, identity, and purpose derived from their victim status. Healing threatens to bankrupt this psychological economy. Jung noted some empaths unconsciously compete over who has suffered more, using their wounds as credentials for empathy and moral superiority, rather than as material for growth. Identity terror and transformation resistance. Many empaths experience ego death panic when considering healing because they don't know who they would be without their wounds. Their entire self-concept, relationships, and life purpose have been organized around suffering. The prospect of wellness triggers existential terror, as it requires abandoning a familiar victim identity and discovering their authentic self beneath psychological damage. Jung realized this mechanism explains why genuine transformation feels threatening rather than appealing. It demands sacrificing the known wounded self for an unknown, integrated self. The addiction to powerlessness. Jung identified a disturbing pattern that keeps sensitive individuals trapped in victim cycles: powerlessness addiction, which provides unconscious benefits while maintaining psychological suffering. Wounded empaths often develop learned helplessness that serves multiple unconscious functions beyond just protection from further harm. This powerlessness becomes psychologically addictive because it offers benefits that conscious strength cannot. Jung documented specific addiction patterns. Responsibility avoidance through victimhood. Remaining wounded provides perfect excuses for not pursuing goals, making difficult changes, or taking risks. The victim identity offers protection from failure, criticism, and the demands of authentic living. Powerlessness becomes a comfortable prison, requiring nothing except continued suffering, while empowerment demands courage, action, and personal accountability. Control through helplessness. Many empaths unconsciously use their victimhood to control others through guilt, sympathy, and rescue responses. Their powerlessness becomes a form of manipulation that gets their needs met indirectly. This creates inverse power, influencing others through weakness rather than strength, which can feel safer than direct assertion of needs and boundaries. Moral superiority through suffering. Some empaths use their wounds to maintain psychological elevation above others. Their pain becomes proof of their sensitivity, consciousness, and spiritual advancement. This creates suffering narcissism, where wounds serve ego inflation rather than growth, making healing feel like losing special status rather than gaining authentic strength. Fear of becoming the oppressor. Many empaths associate all forms of personal power with those who hurt them, creating terror of becoming abusive if they develop strength and assertiveness. This keeps them trapped in powerlessness as a way of maintaining their self-image as good, not realizing that conscious power serves both self and others, while unconscious powerlessness often enables harm. Jung emphasized, recognizing these patterns isn't about self-blame, but understanding unconscious dynamics that prevent authentic empowerment and transformation. If you find yourself strangely attached to your wounds, comment, "I'm ready to be more than my pain." The 4 stages of empathic evolution. Jung identified 4 distinct developmental stages sensitive individuals progress through on their journey from wounded victim to integrated warrior. Stage 1. The unconscious absorber. These empaths experience sensitivity as a pure burden, without recognizing its transformative potential. They feel constantly overwhelmed by others' emotions, seeing their empathy as a curse that makes them vulnerable and weak. Unconscious absorbers engage in pain magnetism, unconsciously attracting drama and toxic situations that confirm their victim identity. They collect evidence that the world is cruel and they're powerless to protect themselves. The breakthrough occurs when they recognize their sensitivity as information about their developmental needs, rather than proof of cosmic unfairness or personal defectiveness. Stage 2. The wounded helper. Jung identified empaths who use their pain to assist others while remaining unable to heal themselves. They become skilled at providing insight and support but maintain their victim identity as the source of their empathic abilities. These individuals fear that healing would diminish their connection to others' pain or make them less able to help. Jung observed they mistake their wounds for their gifts, not realizing empathy enhances through integration. The evolution occurs when they understand that healing themselves enhances, rather than diminishes, their ability to serve others authentically and sustainably. Stage 3. The shadow integrator. Empaths begin consciously reclaiming their disowned psychological material: anger, selfishness, personal power, and assertiveness. This stage feels threatening because it challenges their pure light self-image. Shadow integrators often experience guilt and fear about expressing previously suppressed emotions, worried they're becoming like those who hurt them. They must learn to distinguish between healthy assertiveness and harmful aggression. The transformation accelerates when they realize that owning their shadow makes them more authentic and, paradoxically, more empathic because they're no longer projecting their darkness onto others. Stage 4. The Integrated Warrior. Jung's most developed stage represents empaths who have successfully unified sensitivity with strength, creating conscious empathy. They maintain deep feeling capacity while developing unshakable personal boundaries and authentic power. Integrated warriors demonstrate that empathy and strength enhance each other rather than competing. They can feel deeply without drowning, help others without sacrificing themselves, and maintain compassion while honoring their own needs. These individuals often become natural leaders and healers who model healthy empathy for others, showing that wounds can become wisdom and sensitivity can become a source of power rather than vulnerability. The dangerous transformation terrain. Jung identified specific psychological hazards that can destroy empaths during their wounded to warrior journey, making this one of the most treacherous paths in human development. The identity annihilation crisis. Questioning a wounded identity triggers psychological death terror in empaths whose entire sense of self has been organized around their pain. Healing can feel like ego annihilation rather than liberation. This crisis becomes so destabilizing that many empaths retreat to familiar suffering rather than endure the uncertainty of discovering who they are beyond their wounds. Jung documented severe depression and anxiety during identity transformation phases. The relationship apocalypse. Healing empaths often trigger defensive reactions in family members, friends, and partners who benefited from their wounded patterns. People often unconsciously sabotage the empath's growth to preserve familiar dynamics. Those who relied on the empath's sacrifice may become hostile, manipulative, or rejecting when boundaries emerge, creating isolation precisely when support is most needed during vulnerable transformation periods. The shadow terror response. Confronting disowned psychological material can overwhelm empaths unprepared for the intensity of their suppressed anger, selfishness, and power drives. Shadow integration can feel like moral corruption rather than psychological completion. Without proper guidance, empaths often fear they're becoming bad people when accessing previously rejected aspects, causing them to suppress their shadow again rather than integrate it consciously. The spiritual bypass trap. Empaths attempt to transcend wounds through spiritual practices while avoiding psychological integration work. They use love and light concepts to bypass necessary shadow work and authentic power development. This creates premature transcendence, a spiritual veneer covering unhealed psychological wounds that collapses under stress. The inflation explosion. Empaths develop grandiosity during healing, believing they've achieved special status through their transformation. This can manifest as judgment of others still in victim patterns or claiming superior empathic abilities. Inflation prevents completion of integration work because it recreates superiority/inferiority dynamics rather than authentic empowerment based on psychological wholeness. Jung's integration methodology. Jung developed systematic approaches for navigating the wounded to warrior transformation without falling into common psychological traps. Active shadow engagement protocols. Empaths must consciously reclaim rejected psychological material rather than projecting their darkness onto others. This involves deliberately exploring anger, selfishness, and power drives through structured inner work. Jung created specific shadow practices, examining harsh judgments of others, revealing projected shadow content, engaging with dream figures representing disowned aspects, and practicing expressing suppressed emotions in safe, therapeutic contexts. The goal isn't becoming selfish or aggressive, but achieving psychological completeness by integrating all aspects of personality. Conscious boundary architecture. Jung developed systematic boundary training for empaths who fear protection means becoming cruel or uncaring. This involves learning to distinguish between walls that shut out connection and filters that allow healthy interaction. Jung taught specific boundary skills: declining requests without guilt or extensive justification, recognizing manipulation tactics and responding with clarity, and developing energetic sovereignty, maintaining awareness of personal emotional states separate from others. Healthy boundaries actually enhance empathy by preventing depletion and resentment. Authentic power development training. Empaths must learn power from within rather than avoiding all personal power due to fear of becoming oppressive. This involves discovering strength that serves both individual and collective well-being. Jung's power development included asserting needs and preferences directly, speaking truth even when it creates discomfort, and taking leadership roles when their skills and insight can serve group objectives. The distinction lies between authentic power, self-sovereignty, serving the larger good, and false power, domination, serving ego needs. Identity reconstruction processes. Empaths need systematic approaches for discovering who they are beyond their wounds while maintaining their empathic gifts. This involves archetypal reorientation from victim to healer or warrior patterns. Jung developed identity exploration practices, examining natural talents and interests separate from trauma responses, exploring how sensitivity can serve creative or healing purposes, and developing conscious service, helping others from wholeness rather than woundedness. This allows empaths to maintain their caring nature while serving from strength rather than sacrifice. Transformation, success stories, and failures. Jung's analysis reveals crucial differences between empaths who successfully complete the wounded to warrior journey and those who remain trapped in victim patterns. Integration success. Viktor Frankl. Frankl exemplified Jung's wounded healer transformation by using his Holocaust trauma as material for developing logotherapy and helping others find meaning in suffering. Rather than remaining identified as a victim, he transformed his pain into professional purpose. Frankl's success came from what Jung would call meaning-making integration, using his wounds as teachers rather than identity, developing strength through adversity rather than remaining broken by it. Jung would note that Frankl maintained his sensitivity to suffering while developing psychological resilience that allowed him to help others without being re-traumatized by their pain. Integration success. Nelson Mandela. Mandela exemplified Jung's wounded healer transformation by using 27 years of imprisonment and oppression as material for developing empathic leadership that served not just his people but humanity. He demonstrates Jung's conscious empathy by maintaining compassion for his oppressors while setting clear boundaries about justice and equality. Mandela's approach shows how empaths can transform their deepest wounds into wisdom that serves collective healing rather than remaining trapped in resentment, creating transformative suffering that benefits both individual and community. His success includes refusing to remain identified with his victimization while honoring the lessons it taught about human dignity, forgiveness without enabling, and the power of authentic strength in service of justice. Integration failure. The professional victim. Jung documented patterns of individuals who build entire identities and careers around their wounds without ever actually healing or transforming. They become trauma entrepreneurs who profit from pain without transcending it. These individuals often resist healing because it would threaten their livelihood, relationships, and sense of specialness, keeping them trapped in cycles of suffering and resentment. Jung noted, they may help others, but from shared woundedness rather than integrated strength, often creating dependency rather than empowerment in those they serve. Critical success elements. Jung identified key factors distinguishing transformation from stagnation. Willingness to take responsibility for healing rather than waiting for external rescue. Ability to see wounds as teachers rather than permanent identity markers. Courage to risk losing victim status benefits in exchange for authentic empowerment. Successful transformation requires what Jung called psychological heroism, facing uncomfortable truths about themselves and making difficult changes despite social pressure to remain in familiar wounded patterns. Building warrior support networks. Jung recognized empaths need specific community support during transformation, relationships that encourage growth rather than enabling victim patterns or punishing strength development. Identifying growth catalysts. Jung identified people who support empathic transformation. They encourage personal responsibility, celebrate success and boundary development without feeling threatened, and demonstrate integrated sensitivity themselves. Growth catalysts understand that supporting healing sometimes means refusing to enable drama or participate in victim competitions, instead holding space for empowerment. Avoiding wound bonding traps. Jung warned about relationships based primarily on shared trauma or victim identity. While these connections feel intensely intimate, they often prevent growth by requiring both parties to remain wounded. Wound-bonded relationships typically involve mutual reinforcement of victim stories, competition over suffering severity, and resistance to one person's healing if it threatens the shared wounded identity. Healthy relationships support both parties' evolution rather than requiring them to remain stuck in familiar patterns. Creating transformation communities. Jung advocated for environments that honor both sensitivity and strength, normalize psychological growth and change, and provide practical support for boundary development and power integration. These include therapy groups focused on empowerment, creative communities where sensitivity serves artistic expression, and spiritual environments emphasizing integration. Mentorship and modeling connections. Jung emphasized connecting with people who embody integrated empathy, demonstrating that sensitivity and strength enhance each other. These mentors provide both inspiration and practical guidance. Seeing others who have successfully completed the wounded to warrior transformation proves that empowerment is possible while maintaining empathic gifts. The 5-phase evolution process. Jung documented the specific psychological changes empaths experience during their transformation from wounded victim to integrated warrior. Phase 1. Pain recognition without purpose. Empaths begin acknowledging their wounds consciously rather than numbing or denying them. This phase often feels worse initially because they're experiencing pain without yet understanding its transformative potential. The breakthrough occurs when they stop seeing their sensitivity as punishment and begin recognizing it as information about their psychological development needs and empathic gifts. Phase 2. Shadow confrontation and integration. Empaths face their disowned psychological material, particularly anger about being used, suppressed selfishness, and rejected personal power. This phase triggers guilt and fear about becoming like those who hurt them. Integration involves distinguishing between healthy assertiveness and harmful aggression, learning that owning their shadow makes them more authentic and paradoxically more genuinely empathic. Phase 3. Boundary construction and testing. Empaths develop and implement psychological boundaries that protect their sensitivity while allowing genuine connection. This triggers resistance from others accustomed to unlimited access. The transformation accelerates when they learn to tolerate others' disappointment about boundaries without automatically sacrificing themselves to restore harmony. Phase 4. Power reclamation and purpose discovery. Empaths develop authentic personal power and discover how to use their sensitivity in service of larger purposes rather than just absorbing others' pain. This includes pursuing their own goals, expressing their truth, and taking leadership roles when their empathic insights can serve collective objectives. Phase 5. Warrior integration and service. Empaths achieve conscious empathy, maintaining deep sensitivity while possessing unshakable strength. They can feel others' pain without drowning in it and help without depleting themselves. These integrated warriors often become teachers, healers, or leaders who model healthy empathy for others still struggling with their own wounded to warrior transformation. If you're learning to honor your sensitivity by protecting it, comment, "My wounds are becoming my wisdom." Common integration derailments. Jung identified specific traps that prevent successful wounded to warrior transformation, warning about approaches that maintain victim patterns or create false empowerment. The spiritual bypassing escape. Jung warned about empaths using spiritual practices to avoid psychological integration work. They attempt to transcend wounds through meditation, positive thinking, or forgiveness concepts while never actually developing authentic strength. This creates pseudo-transcendence, a spiritual veneer covering unhealed psychological wounds that collapse under stress, returning the individual to victim patterns. Genuine spiritual development requires integrating shadow material rather than bypassing it. The victim-to-perpetrator swing. Empaths overcorrect from complete powerlessness to aggressive domination, developing reactive strength that protects but also attacks and isolates. This swing often stems from unintegrated anger and fear, causing empaths to become defensive rather than empowered. Jung advocated for conscious strength that protects without attacking and includes both power and compassion. The healed superiority complex. Jung identified empaths developing grandiosity during transformation, believing their healing journey makes them spiritually superior to others still struggling with victim patterns. This prevents completion of integration work because it recreates the very superiority/inferiority dynamics that wounded them initially, just with reversed roles. Authentic empowerment includes humility and recognition that psychological development is ongoing rather than achieved. The isolation safety trap. Empaths withdraw from all relationships during healing rather than learning to navigate connections with healthy boundaries. While some solitude is necessary, complete isolation prevents practicing new relationship skills and can become a prison of safety that limits growth and service opportunities. Jung recommended graduated re-engagement with people who support transformation while maintaining boundaries with those who don't. The cultural warrior mission. Jung believed empaths who complete the wounded to warrior transformation serve essential functions in collective psychological evolution, providing models of integrated consciousness for humanity's development. Jung observed that cultures often oscillate between emotional suppression and overwhelm, lacking examples of integrated empathy, combining sensitivity with strength. Warrior empaths fill this cultural gap. Relationship revolution leadership. Transformed empaths become natural pioneers of healthy relationship dynamics, demonstrating that connection doesn't require self-sacrifice and that boundaries enhance rather than diminish intimacy. Their relationships model conscious partnership, connections based on mutual empowerment and support for authentic individual development within caring connection. Collective healing facilitation. Empaths who have integrated their own shadow become capable of helping communities process collective trauma and dysfunction without being overwhelmed or re-traumatized. This capacity makes them valuable during cultural transitions and social healing processes, as they can navigate intense collective emotions while maintaining wisdom and perspective. Consciousness evolution acceleration. Jung saw empathic transformation as contributing to humanity's psychological evolution toward greater integration and consciousness. Each completed wounded to warrior journey adds to collective wisdom about sensitivity, strength, and integration. These individuals become living proof that empathy and power can unite, that wounds can become wisdom, and that the most effective warriors are those who have transformed their own pain into strength, serving both self and others. The unstoppable rise. The empath's journey from wounded to warrior represents an unstoppable rise because it transforms their greatest perceived weakness into their most powerful strength. Jung's insights reveal this transformation doesn't require abandoning sensitivity, but integrating it with authentic personal power and conscious boundaries. When empaths learn to honor their wounds without being defined by them, they discover their sensitivity was never the problem. The problem was lack of integration that allowed their gift to become a burden. Jung's framework shows that empathy combined with shadow work creates psychological resilience nothing can destroy. The warrior emerging from this process maintains capacity for deep feeling while developing unshakable inner strength. They can witness suffering without drowning, offer help without self-sacrifice, and maintain compassion while honoring personal needs and boundaries. Your sensitivity isn't something to overcome, but something to protect through conscious development. Jung's work demonstrates the wounded healer represents humanity's highest potential, transforming pain into wisdom, wounds into strength, and victimhood into conscious service. The rise beyond shadow becomes unstoppable because it follows the psyche's natural movement toward wholeness and integration. Every step from wounded toward warrior contributes to both personal healing and collective human evolution. If you're ready to transform your wounds into wisdom and your sensitivity into strength, comment, "I choose warrior over victim." Your journey from wounded to warrior isn't just personal healing. It's contributing to humanity's evolution toward integrated consciousness and authentic empowerment. Thanks for watching. See you in the next dimension.